Hey guys, it's Tom Cunith. I'm a solutions architect at Cisco's Advanced Services. In this video, we're going to walk through the process of building a vSmart centralized policy from vManage using the UI Policy Builder. With me today, I have Zane, who's a technical marketing engineer.
Hi Tom, how you doing?
Doing great, Zane. How about yourself?
Good.
And I also have Sakruth, who's also a technical marketing engineering leader. How are you doing, Sakruth?
Hi Tom, happy to be here.
Yeah, you ready to see the demo?
Yep.
Excellent. So Ali, why don't you take it away for us?
Thanks, Tom. What we're going to do today is build a policy from scratch. What is the workflow to go through this? So using the vManage, the first thing that you want to do is go to Configuration. In the Configuration section, we'll go to the Policies tab. In the Policies tab, it will bring us to the page where all the policies in the system are listed. The thing that we're going to build today is a centralized policy. That is a policy that affects the SD-WAN overlay. Let's go through building a policy from scratch. The button that we'll use is the Add Policy tab. We click that, and what we'll find is that the policy builder actually provides to us the workflow. What are the steps that we'll have to take? So from here, we can already tell the first step is creating those lists, the groups of interest. So for simplicity, we'll refer to them as objects. You will define the objects. The second step is also listed out here, configure the topology and membership. So for simplicity, we'll refer to as step 2 as define the topology. The third step is define the rules for traffic. So these would be traffic rules. And the last step is the actual application of the policies to the sites and VPNs in question. So step 4 is application. And I suppose to clarify that, we'll say applying policies. All right, so it's a 4-step process. Define the objects that you'll be using, what you'll be manipulating, what are the things of interest. Build your network topology, step 2. Define what routes, what tunnels, what does the topology look like. Step 3, define the traffic patterns. Where will traffic go? How will it be treated? Am I allowing it? Am I denying it? Am I changing QoS? And then finally, applying the policies that I've written out to the sites in question.
So this workflow applies to a control policy, as well as a data policy, as well as an application route policy. Is it the same?
That's exactly right. This workflow, and as we'll go through it, we'll see that in the topology section is where we will be referencing control policies, which are the equivalent of our route maps that change the network topology. And we will also be looking at VPN membership policies that define what VPNs are permitted. So you'll see here it says configure topology and VPN membership. That actually means using control policy to change the topology and using VPN membership to control which VPNs are permitted. What you mentioned about application-aware routing, that applies to traffic. How do I treat my applications? What happens to my application flows? Those will be defined in the traffic rules, so in step 3.
So this workflow, if you're building a particular policy that's just a control policy, you would not even need to hit step 3, right?
That's exactly right. If you're just changing something in the topology and you don't have any traffic rules in your network, you would skip that step and you continue on to apply. This wizard is to guide you into building a full policy for your environment. So this isn't piecemeal in terms of you'll have policy X for some other period of time and policy Y and things like that. This is a holistic policy that applies to your entire overlay, governing the objects, your topology, your traffic, and the sites in question.
Right, because at one given time, you can only have one policy actually active, and so it needs to contain all those rule sets.
That's exactly right. This master policy, this central policy, only one of these can be active at a given time to prevent any conflicts or incorrect information entered. This ensures consistency. And this ensures that in one place, you define your entire network rules.
So what you're saying, this is a network-wide centralized policy.
That's exactly right. This is a network-wide central policy.
Sure. So Ali, though you're defining one master policy, within each policy you can have multiple sequences and achieve everything you want.
That's exactly right. As we go through each layer, we'll see that even though the steps are identified here, within each layer, you have the option to add multiple arguments as to how to treat specific applications, how to treat specific routes, how to treat specific tunnels, so on and so forth. So the first thing that we do is look at the groups of interest. So that's our step 1, looking at the objects, also referred to as lists. Here, I have all the different things that are of importance to me. The applications that I care about, the colors that I use in the network, any prefixes that I will be using for routing or QoS or application manipulation, the site breakdown. Is it a US site or a European site or APJ? Is it a small, medium, large site? All the ways that I break down my network, I will define in site. The SLAs, the TLOCs, and the VPNs. So let's click on each of these and see what is present in this environment. Here, I have a number of applications already defined. So let's add one to this list. So I'm going to add a new application list. I'm going to call it social media. And the application that I'll add in here is Facebook and LinkedIn. So I've created this new list called social media, which has these specific applications in there. And I add it to my application list. Let's go to prefix. Here, I have one entry for the default route, which I'm going to manipulate in this environment. Let's add one new one. And I'm going to call this RFC 1918, which, based on the standard, is going to have the following addresses. So as part of this list, I've defined those 3 summary blocks that make up the private address space. And I'm going to add this to this environment. In this fashion, I can continue to add all the different objects that are of importance to me. If I look at the sites, currently I have a breakdown based on data center, branch, and a collection for all the branches and all the data centers. If I want to add additional sites, I can do so. So if I wanted to create some convention, such as small site, I can specify something like site IDs 1 to 5 are classified as small site. So some site range identifying small sites. And I'll add this to the environment. In this fashion, I define the objects that are important to my network. My sites, my prefixes, applications, SLAs, all the different parameters that I will be using. Let's go to the next page, where we define a topology policy. So go to Next. And now we're in step 2, which is where we define the topologies. So here you'll see topology and VPN membership. Topology is the equivalent of a control policy akin to a route map in the system. Let's add a topology for this environment. So I click on Add Topology, and it gives me a number of options. The hub and spoke and mesh are simple guides into creating this topology into a hub and spoke or mesh type environment. But if you wanted to build something customized, you can do so as well, writing all the different rules needed. So let's create something custom, something where we need to figure out all the things that we want to enter. The first thing it asks me to do is plug in a name. The next thing it asks me to do is add in a description. And then it gives me the ability to add in sequences. This is where I'll be adding in all the different arguments that will change my topology. I click on sequence type, and it gives me these options. I can either manipulate routes, or I can manipulate TLOCs. So if I want to manipulate the routes within different segments, this is the option I'll use. And when I want to manipulate the TLOCs to build tunnels, this is what I will use. So let's add in a rule for routes. I click on sequence rule. Now it brings me to match and action conditions. What am I matching on and what action am I taking? In the match, as you may recall in the previous step, I defined a prefix list called RFC 1918. So I selected prefix list, it gave me this menu, and I selected the object that I had created. So now this rule is essentially saying match on the RFC 1918 SuperNet addresses. What action do I want to take? So let's say I go to action, and it gives me initially two options, permit or deny, accept or reject. Let's say I'm going to accept them, but I'm going to alter the preference. A new preference tab shows up under the action section. And this is where I'll specify some value for preference. Within OMP, the default preference is 0. Higher preference wins. And as you can see, the number can be significantly large, so you have a lot of granularity in terms of being able to create very detailed and granular preferential control for your prefixes. And I add this rule in. So in this fashion, I can continue to add multiple rules to dictate how routes are handled in this environment. This is what creates the routing environment. But what if I want to manipulate the tunnels? I go back and select the sequence type. And I'm going to use the tlock option to manipulate the tlocks. Again, here, I'll specify a rule. And again, it gives me the same breakdown in terms of what are your match conditions and what are your action conditions. In my match condition, I'm going to reference the site and invoke that site that I just created in the previous step, save it, and add it into the system. What essentially I'm doing here is invoking the object that I defined in the match condition and specifying various actions. As you can see, I didn't change the action, so the default here is reject. Based on this policy that I've just written out, any route that arrives that is an RFC 1918 prefix will get set with that particular preference. And any tlock advertised from whatever is classified as a small site will be rejected. In this fashion, you can navigate the policy landscape and add, remove, accept, reject, and alter whatever you need to in this environment, manipulating the routes and manipulating the tunnels that will be available in the system. Once I've defined what is going to make up my entire topology landscape, I'm going to save this control policy. And it brings me back to my topology page. So now I've created a policy that makes up my step 2, that is, what does the topology look like? So for this demo example, what I've done is change the preference for the RFC 1918 SuperNet addresses and denied all the tunnels from any site that's classified as a small site. This is an arbitrary set of rules. You can choose to make something more meaningful in terms of hub and smoke, mesh, different types of sites, small, medium, large, anything that will be applicable to your environment.